Rebecca Anderson stood frozen in the doorway of Maxwell Grant's corner office. The Manhattan skyline stretched behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, the morning sun glinting off glass towers that seemed to mock her shock. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the subtle hum of the building's HVAC system. Maxwell didn't look up from his computer, his fingers continuing to type as if she were already gone. "It's quite simple, Rebecca. Your position has been eliminated. The board feels your department is redundant." Her department, Digital Innovation, which she had built from nothing over 5 years at Grant Enterprises. The department that had increased company revenue by 37% through new market strategies. Her department. "Max, we've worked together for 5 years. You recruited me personally." Rebecca clutched the folder containing the termination papers. "You could have given me some warning." At that, Maxwell finally looked up. His steel-gray eyes, the same ones that had once gazed at her with respect across meeting tables, and, briefly, with something more across candlelit dinners, now regarded her with cold indifference. "Business isn't personal, Rebecca. You should know that by now." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. Their brief romance 2 years ago had ended when Maxwell made it clear his career came first. They'd maintained a professional relationship, and she'd thought they had mutual respect. Clearly, she'd been wrong. She straightened her Chanel blazer, the one she'd splurged on after landing the Johnson account. "May I at least finish the Morgan presentation? They specifically requested me, and the meeting is tomorrow." "Natalie." "We'll handle it." Maxwell returned to his screen. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings. Your severance package is generous. I suggest you take it and move on quickly." The dismissal was so abrupt, so cold, that Rebecca could barely breathe. 10 minutes later, she was standing on the sidewalk outside the gleaming Grant Enterprises building, a cardboard box containing 5 years of her life in her arms, the spring breeze whipping her hair across her tear-streaked face. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant Olivia. He didn't even tell the team himself. "HR is announcing it now. This is wrong. Call me." Rebecca hailed a cab to her Upper West Side apartment. The doorman's sympathetic glance told her she looked as devastated as she felt. Inside her apartment, she kicked off her Laubaudens and collapsed onto her sofa, staring at the view of Central Park she had worked so hard to afford. The severance would cover her mortgage for 6 months, but after that? In this economy? Her phone rang. The Morgan Group. Rebecca hesitated, then answered. "Rebecca, it's James Morgan. I just heard what happened. Listen, I want you to know that we chose Grant Enterprises because of you. If you're out, we're reconsidering our options." As Rebecca listened to James, a plan began to form in her mind. Maxwell Grant might think he'd thrown her away, but Rebecca Anderson wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Maxwell Grant was having the worst morning of his professional life. The Morgan Group of $50 million account had just called to cancel their meeting and withdraw their business. When pressed for a reason, James Morgan had simply said, "We work with people we trust. Rebecca Anderson was that person for us." It was the third call like it this morning. Maxwell loosened his Hermes tie and buzzed his assistant. "Get me the latest projections if we lose the Morgan account." The numbers were disastrous. A board would crucify him. His office door opened without a knock. His father, Harold Grant, founder and chairman, strode in with a thunderous expression. At 68, Harold still commanded every room he entered. "What the hell did you do?" Harold slammed a financial report onto Maxwell's desk. 3 major accounts threatening to walk. The Morgan Group already gone? "And I hear it's because you fired Rebecca Anderson?" Maxwell stood. The board agreed her department could be streamlined. "The board followed your recommendation," Harold snapped. "The same recommendation you made 3 weeks after she turned down your dinner invitation." Don't think I don't know about that. Maxwell flinched. His father's network of informants had always been impressive. This isn't personal, Maxwell insisted. Like, hell it isn't. Harold's voice dropped dangerously. Fix it. Today, or I'll be reconsidering your position next. After his father left, Maxwell sat heavily in his leather chair. The truth was more complicated than his father knew. Yes, Rebecca had turned down his attempt to rekindle their relationship, but that wasn't why he'd pushed for her dismissal, it was fear. Fear that Rebecca's innovations were making his own contributions obsolete. Fear that the board was noticing her more than him. Fear that his father might see in Rebecca what Maxwell saw someone more talented than himself. Now that fear had become reality in the worst possible way. Rebecca wasn't just talented, she was essential. And he had thrown her away. Maxwell tried calling Rebecca. Straight to voicemail. He sent texts, emails, nothing. By afternoon, disaster struck again. The server containing all of Rebecca's client presentations and strategy documents, supposedly backed up, was corrupted. The backup had failed 3 months ago, and no one had noticed. The Morgan presentation was tomorrow. Without Rebecca's materials, they had nothing. As the office emptied for the day, Maxwell sat in the growing darkness, his empire crumbling around him. There was only one solution. He needed Rebecca back. Not just for the presentations, but for everything. He had made a catastrophic mistake, and now he had to beg the woman he'd cruelly dismissed to save him. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. He knew where she lived. It was time to swallow his pride before he lost everything. Rebecca was halfway through her second glass of Cabernet when her doorman called up. Miss Anderson, Mr. Grant is here to see you. Should I send him away? They? Question made her smile, despite everything. Ted had been her doorman for 4 years and had seen Maxwell during their brief relationship. He was firmly team Rebecca. Curiosity won out over pride. Send him up, Ted. Thank you. She changed from her sweatpants into slim black pants, but kept her oversized sweater. No reason to dress up for the man who'd fired her 12 hours ago. When the knock came, Rebecca took a deep breath and opened the door. Maxwell Grant looked wrecked. His perfectly tailored suit was wrinkled, his tie askew, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. Most shocking were his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Rebecca. He said her name like a prayer. I made a terrible mistake. She leaned against the doorframe, not inviting him in. Which mistake? Firing me without warning? Having security escort me out like a criminal? Or losing the backup server with all my presentation files? His eyes widened. How did you? Olivia texted me. She's handed in her resignation, by the way, as have Thomas and Gia from my team. Rebecca took a sip of her wine. Apparently, treating people like disposable resources has consequences. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair. I deserve that. I deserve worse. But the Morgan Group meeting is tomorrow, and without your presentation. Without me, you mean? Rebecca corrected him. James Morgan called me hours ago. They're not interested in Grant Enterprises without me leading their account. Please, Maxwell's voice cracked. I know I have no right to ask, but the company my father everything is falling apart. I need your help. Something in his desperation touched a part of Rebecca she thought had hardened over during the humiliation of the morning. She remembered the Maxwell she'd first met, brilliant, driven, but also kind. The man who'd stayed late, helping her prepare for her first major presentation. The man who'd once looked at her like she was magic. Come in, she said finally, but I'm not promising anything. In her living room, with the lights of Central Park twinkling below, Maxwell told her everything. How the board had been divided about her department. How he'd pushed for the restructuring, not just because she'd rejected him, but because he was afraid of being outshined. How 3 major accounts had threatened to leave upon hearing of her dismissal. How his father had nearly fired him. I was jealous, he admitted, staring into the glass of wine she'd reluctantly offered him. You're better at this than I am. Everyone sees it, even my father. Rebecca studied him. In all their time together, she'd never seen him this vulnerable, this honest. What exactly are you asking for, Max? Come back. Not just for the Morgan presentation. Permanently. With a promotion, a raise, anything you want. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I was wrong, Rebecca, about business. About what matters. About you. In the silence that followed, Rebecca considered all her options, including the one she hadn't told him about yet. James Morgan didn't just call to tell me they were withdrawing from Grant Enterprises, Rebecca said, setting down her wineglass. He offered me a job, Chief Innovation Officer at Morgan Group. Double my salary, equity stake, complete creative. Control, Maxwell paled. You're going to work for my competitor? I haven't accepted yet. Rebecca moved to the window, gazing out at the park. I was too busy processing the fact that the man I once loved, the man I trusted with my career, threw me away like I meant nothing. Maxwell flinched at her words. I never stopped. He cut himself off. Rebecca turned. Never stopped what? Caring about you? He finished, his voice low. Even when I was being an absolute fool. The admission hung in the air between them, tangled with 5 years of history, passion, ambition, and hurt. I need to show you something, Rebecca said finally. She retrieved her laptop and opened a presentation. This is what I was working on before you fired me. A complete reimagining of Grant Enterprises' digital strategy, projected to increase revenue by 62% over 3 years. Maxwell watched as she scrolled through slides showcasing innovative approaches he'd never considered. Market expansions, strategic partnerships, a complete digital transformation. This is brilliant, he whispered. Why didn't you bring this to me earlier? I was going to. Today was the day I had scheduled to present it to you. Her smile was sad. Ironic timing. Maxwell closed the laptop gently. Rebecca, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your help, but Grant Enterprises needs you. I need you professionally, and ... double quotes. He hesitated. I've missed you. Not just today, but every day since I let my pride ruin what we had. Rebecca studied him. The sincerity in his eyes seemed real, but she'd been fooled before. If, and that's a big if, I were to consider coming back, I'd need guarantees, written into my contract. Executive Vice President title, board seat, complete autonomy over my department. And, she added, you and I would need to establish clear boundaries. Anything, Maxwell said immediately. Whatever you want. And there's one more condition, Rebecca's voice hardened. You need to publicly acknowledge to the entire company that firing me was your mistake. No corporate speak. No saving face. The truth. It was the ultimate humbling for a man like Maxwell Grant. His expression told her he understood exactly what she was asking to. Sacrifice his carefully cultivated image of infallibility. After a long moment, he nodded. I'll do it. Your worth. More than my pride. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning beyond the professional context. Rebecca took a deep breath. I'll help with the Morgan presentation tomorrow. After that, we'll see about the rest. As Maxwell rose to leave, relief evident in every line of his body, Rebecca added, I'm not doing this for you, Max. I'm doing it for the company, for the people who work there, for what we built. I understand, he said softly. Thank you, Rebecca. I promise you won't regret giving the company, a second chance. As the door closed behind him, Rebecca wondered if she was making the right choice, or if tomorrow would bring another heartbreak, another betrayal. Only time would tell. The Morgan Group conference room fell silent as Rebecca concluded her presentation. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the impressed faces of the executives around the table. James Morgan leaned forward. "Exceptional as always, Rebecca. But before we proceed, I need to understand exactly what your role will be moving forward." His gaze shifted pointedly to Maxwell, who sat quietly beside Rebecca. Maxwell stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Ms. Anderson will be our new Executive Vice President of Innovation and Strategy, with a seat on our board. She'll have complete autonomy over your account and her department." James raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a promotion from yesterday's dismissal." Maxwell met his gaze steadily. "Yesterday was the worst mistake of my professional career. 1. I've acknowledged publicly to our entire company this morning." He glanced at Rebecca with undisguised admiration. "We're fortunate Ms. Anderson has agreed to return." The meeting concluded with handshakes and a signed contract. The Morgan Group was staying with Grant Enterprises with the stipulation that Rebecca would remain their direct contact. As they walked through the Morgan Building's marble lobby, Rebecca turned to Maxwell. "You did well in there." "I told the truth," he replied simply. "Something I should have been doing all along." Outside, Maxwell's driver held the door of the Bentley. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Maxwell said as they settled into the leather seats. "About establishing clear boundaries." Rebecca tensed. "Max, please hear me out." His voice was gentle, not the commanding tone she was accustomed to. "You're right. We need professional boundaries. Clear lines that protect both your position and mine from ... complications." Relief washed over her. "I'm glad you understand. But," he continued, "I was hoping that perhaps with time we might explore whether there's still something personal worth salvaging, not as boss and employee, but as equals, as partners." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small velvet box. No pressure, no expectations. Inside was a key. "What's this? The Hamptons' house? The one you always loved. I've put it in your name." He held up a hand when she began to protest. "It's not a bribe or a romantic gesture. It's restitution. You earned it with the work you've done for the company. The work I took credit for too many times." Rebecca stared at the key, emotion tightening her throat. The beachfront property where they'd spent weekends together during their brief relationship, where she'd first told him she loved him, where she'd first seen the real Maxwell beneath the corporate mask. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it, all of it." His eyes held hers, vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "I've learned the hard way what matters, Rebecca. It's not power or pride. It's people, specifically one person." The car pulled up to the Grant Enterprises building where just yesterday security had escorted her out. Today, she would walk back in as an executive with power equal to Maxwell's. The journey from dismissal to redemption had taken less than 24 hours. "One step at a time," Rebecca said finally. "We rebuild the professional trust first." Maxwell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And then?" Rebecca thought of the presentation she'd given, the vision she had for the company's future. She thought of the hurt he'd caused her and the genuine remorse he'd shown. She thought of the potential they'd always had professionally and personally. "And then we'll see," she said with the hint of a smile. "Some things are worth a second chance." As they walked into the building together, side by side rather than one leading the other, Rebecca knew that whatever happened next, she was walking into it on her own terms. Not as the woman who had been fired without mercy, but as the woman whose worth had finally been recognized. By the company, by Maxwell, and most importantly, by herself.